Right, welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting, the meeting number 8 for fiscal year 2021. We are meeting remotely, and this is pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: on YouTube at Westborough TV, or on Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192, or on the website westboroughTV.org under the Government tab, Meetings on Demand. Right. I'm pretty sure I'm still supposed to read that every time. Yeah. Thought I'd check.
Yeah.
Right. For today's agenda, we do have one set of the meetings from our last, the minutes from our last meeting on October 8th. To go through, as well as following that, we have our town manager, Christy Williams, and our town finance director, Leah Talbot, here to speak with us about sort of the current financial state and take any questions we have on the town warrant. Following that, at 6 p.m., we have scheduled the chair of the Westborough Golf Course Operating Committee, Katie Welch, will be here to talk about Articles 3, 7, and 8. And then following that, we'll do future draft agendas, liaison reports, public reminders, and then adjourn. Any questions on the agenda?
I just want to say that I am impressed with Michael's vocabulary, but motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Discussion, please. Does it, the copy I'm looking at from my computer file, and this is the bane of save as, says September 17th at the top, and it should say October 8th. Do you have that copy by any chance?
Let me take a look. I missed that when I reviewed it.
Yeah, that's why it's labeled a draft.
Yeah, I missed it. I think I must have looked at the outer header.
Yeah. So your motion should probably be to amend.
So motion, yeah, it does say September 17th. Motion to approve the minutes as amended, and you can now amend them.
Sounds good.
Bradley, second.
Thank you, Andrew. All right. Oh, let's see. We'll go around the room. Okay, Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Ms. Board.
Board, yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Yes.
Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes.
Wait, Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Mr. Roush.
Mr. Roush, yes.
And Keough, yes. That is 9-0-0. All right. And with that, we'll move on in the agenda. And we have Town Manager Christy Williams and Town Finance Director Leah Talbot here, and I will turn it over to them. Thank you for attending.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for accommodating this time. I think what we wanted to start out with was just an update to the presentation that we gave in your joint meeting with the Selectmen on September 22nd. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Okay. So this is the budget presentation, very similar to what you saw on the 22nd. I'm actually going to go through the first few slides quickly because those have not changed. So as you know, when we closed out 2020, the actual revenues came in higher than we had originally anticipated, which led to the certification of free cash. I'm just going to skip through this a little bit. So we certified at the end of fiscal 21 the 13,160,890. At the September town meeting, we had proposed using the 58,983, which was approved. And then at the upcoming fall town meeting, we're proposing that 1.1 million, so almost $1.2 million. And then which would leave us with $11.9 million in free cash. And so we would be, the free cash balance as a percentage would be 11.7%. And then including our stabilization funds would be just over 15%. We had talked to you about the state guidance and the estimated reductions that we made due to COVID. And then the fact that the governor and the legislature had committed to level funding. And so we actually did at the beginning of, or last week, we got new cherry sheet numbers from the state. And so even though the budget has not been finalized, we were able to use the new cherry sheet numbers in our calculations. Again, we did estimate local receipts going down. We have received our we do have our first quarter numbers. And so we're at about 20% of collections in our first quarter, which is about where we would expect to be. It's not 25% because we do receive a lot of our revenue through motor vehicle excise tax, and those just aren't due at this time. So 20% is actually right where we would expect, but it's 20% of what we would expect based on the reductions that we did make coming into FY21. So one of the things that I had showed you before was what the tax bill was in FY20. So that's the $9,775. In March, when we came before you with our budget, we were anticipating going up to the $10,232, which would be an increase of $457 to the average single family. In June, we had cut, we had changed our estimates, but we also cut the budget significantly. And so in June, we were estimating that same 457, even with estimated reductions in state aid, Chapter 70, and local receipts. Currently, we're at an estimate of $10,025 tax bill for the average single family, which is a $250 increase over FY20. That's going into the November town meeting. As you know, there are some raise and appropriate articles, and I'll go through that on the upcoming warrant. And so if those were to be approved, it would be an average single family tax bill of $10,056 or a $281 increase from FY20. I just wanted to go through, I did send out the draft motions this afternoon, especially for Article 2. I think it's important to see very clearly what we're proposing the motion to be. This has changed a little bit from our September 22nd presentation. The first few have not. So we are asking for an increase to the fire department budget to fund that union contract, an increase to the school department to fund settled union contracts, a 6-month funding of the EDC coordinator position. As you know, that position has been vacant for quite a few months, and something that we held open as a vacancy because of the impacts of COVID. In the public works, that was a vacancy that we also held open. So we're requesting that we fund this. This number has actually gone down from the number that you saw in September because there were other savings identified in the DPW budget because of other vacancies that were budgeted for. And so we've gone from a request of about $32,000 to this $15,000 or $2 on the average single family tax bill. There's the request to fund one new police officer position. So I believe that you had Chief Laurie and Deputy Chief Minardi here to talk to you about that, as well as their capital requests. As you'll remember, initially the ask was 3 additional police officer positions. So this is just one police officer position, and it's an ask to fund for 7 months. One of the things that we had not talked about was the increase in the legal budget. As you all know, the town or the Board of Selectmen has voted to file as an intervener when Eversource files with the Department of Public Utility. We don't know when exactly that will be. We were told the end of the month. It's sort of with COVID and everything else, it continues to move out. But once they do file and we get all of the information related to what the project is going to be, the town will need to hire an expert to go through that data and issue a report. And so that's a request of $30,000 increase to the legal budget. And then we're also requesting an $8,000 increase to the buildings and grounds budget. At the Regal Theater, we do need to go in and secure the building. And so we have received a quote for that. And so we would just request that $8,000 increase to the buildings and grounds budget. One of the things that is not on here because we're showing tax impact, but that you would have seen in the motions is a transfer of about $50,000 from the water enterprise salary and wages to water enterprise expenses. Earlier this year, our operations manager at the DPW moved on to a different community. And we're required to have someone with specific water licenses in order to do the work that we need to do. And so we did contract with an engineering firm to provide that service to us. And so we use the recognized savings in some of the positions that we will need to transfer into expenses in order to fund the contract, because contracts obviously are funded through expenses. So that's a transfer, and that's not something that would impact the taxes, which is why it's not on this slide. And then Article 15 is the building commissioner article, which elevates that position to the community development director position, which is a $5,500 request. It would be a 6-month position, an increase for 6 months beginning January 1st, which is a $1 impact to the average single family. So the total proposed budget increases in the upcoming warrant is now $248,177 or $31 to the average single family. And this just shows a year-over-year comparison. So it's a 2.47% increase to the overall budget. It's a $281 or 2.87% increase to the average single-family tax bill. This is assuming that everything passes at town meeting. So it's a 16.2% increase to free cash. And then an estimated increase of 5.63% of our excess levy capacity. And that's all I have. So I just wanted to make sure that you all saw the changes to that presentation. And so, well, certainly I can send that out to you to share, and it's something that we'll post on the website. We've been trying to post all of our budget presentations following COVID. So,
Christy, thank
Christy,
you.
this is the budget you expect to take to the town meeting?
yes, in November. Yep.
So I forwarded your documents, Christy. I think it was about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So it was the motions, and then I think it was also the 2 pages from the fall town meeting warrant that we usually provide, which probably would have contained the similar numbers to what you just showed, right? Okay. So
Yeah. So Leah did put that together, and the numbers do match the presentation. Yeah.
Beth, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm really confused that the Regal Theater is on our list of things because I thought we lost the Regal Theater to owners who came out of the woodwork and claimed it again.
We did receive a letter from someone who said that they had an interest in the property, or that they potentially had ownership of the property or an interest in the property. At that point, that's when the selectmen decided not to move forward with the bid process that we had been engaged in and the eminent domain taking. But they have not. No one has actually claimed ownership, so the situation at that building remains the same, where there's no identified owner at this point.
Just keeping the building from getting ruined. And if some owner does come forward, can we bill them for our taking care of their building?
Yes, yeah. So we're going through the tax title process, and so anything that we paid for that building, we would recover in selling the building, or if someone were to come forward and be able to show ownership.
Okay. So in other words, the original plan was kind of undone, and you're going forward with the backup plan, the slower version.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you remember that one of the things on the warrant, and something that you all probably remember, is that town meeting had authorized us to borrow $6 million if we did take it by eminent domain and then later found an owner.
Right.
So that's a process. So we're able to rescind that because we didn't move forward with that process.
Okay, that makes sense. So we don't actually own the building at this point because we didn't take it. We're just maintaining it because we don't want it to fall apart on our watch.
Well, we're trying to secure it for public safety.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I mean, I accept that there's got to be some proper words for why we're involved. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, the Eversource contract, I mean, could you fill us in on what it is about the Eversource activity that we're going to protest?
Sure. So the Eversource is proposing the Worcester feed line project, which I could certainly send you more information, but they essentially want to put a pipeline through. Most of that project is in Westborough, going out to Worcester. The intent of it is to provide better pressure throughout the line, but it ends in Worcester. In January, we had a public meeting where Eversource presented the project, and there was significant opposition, I would say, from the community, where the community came and asked a lot of questions and spoke against the project for several reasons. One of them being that it doesn't support the energy goals of the community. It doesn't support the energy goals of the state, and it actually doesn't even support the energy goals that Eversource CEOs have stated. Also, there's concern about the need for it. There's concern that it might be an abandoned asset at some point if we do work our way away from natural gas. There's concern about its impact on the community during construction. So there's several things. And so the board has voted to become an intervener in the process, which is just when they go before the energy siting board under DPU, they have to file, and the town is an interested party. So the town will have the option to become an intervener. And at that point, the town would, once they file, we would be able to look at their entire application with a lot of details that we have not been provided with yet. And so we would be hiring an expert to help us look through all of those documents and really understand the impacts on the community and how the town wants to move forward.
Paul, did
Thank
you have
you.
a question?
No, I had the same question as Hank, thanks.
Okay.
Hi, Christy, this is Andrew. At one point in the slide, you indicated that there was going to be, I think, 16.22% in our reserves and free cash. Is the number I was seeing? Is that the number that would be the case if everything passed on the fall town meeting?
So that's the percent change, but yes, that would be if everything passed at fall town meeting.
So maybe I didn't pick it up as percent change. I was seeing that as percent of our budget. Was that the wrong read?
The 15.66, is that what you're talking about, Andrew?
It might be 6.6. I thought it was 16.2%. It was the number that was tied to what I thought was the amount of our cash and reserves as a percentage of our budget.
So it's 15.66, I believe.
Right.
And that is it.
That's the percentage of, that's the total reserve percentage, including the stabilization funds. So it's not a change, it's the total.
Correct.
If everything were to pass.
I'm sorry, that there was a 16.2% number or a 16.6% number. Was that the number?
That was on the last slide, and that's was the percent change from FY20 to 21.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So Andrew, in that email I sent out about 4 o'clock, Christy and Lee had provided the financial revenue and expenditure sheet as well as free cash and retained earnings, and it's right there on the bottom, 15.66.
So I have a question on
Thank
that.
you. I'm sorry, just to put a cap on it, I was confused between that 15 and the 16. Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. I have a detail.
Sure.
I just went and got the financial revenue and expenditure estimated. So I just wanted to check one detail. Christy, I thought you said, and maybe I misheard, that the $281 tax increase, now we're talking for FY21, so that's this coming up fall meeting, is 2.4% increase, but on the tables, it says it's a 2.87%. So is it 2.47% or 2.87%?
It's 2.87% increase. The 2.47% is the percent change in the budget.
Okay, that's the change, and the other one is the absolute. Okay.
Sean, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
It's for Christy and Lee, and it's a little more big picture, please. First of all, thanks for the willingness to keep coming back to us with these budgets every time something changes. It's great. We appreciate it. Just from you called out on the second page, the fact that there was a concern that you don't know what the impact is going to be going forward from COVID-19. You expressed some concern that it's going to affect fiscal years beyond 21. So I guess what I'm asking is, have you guys had the opportunity to sit down and do any kind of what if planning, scenario planning of some kind? So if certain metrics are approached, let's say an additional decrease in revenue from taxes and fees, that you have some pre-thought out options that you might pursue or that the town might pursue in responding to that kind of a situation?
Are you talking about fiscal 22?
I'm talking, yeah, I think you've done fiscal 21. You pretty much nailed the numbers as far as I can tell. I'm talking about 22, 23. We don't know how long the impact is going to be. We don't know what the impact might be from businesses closing for good in the town, empty office space, et cetera, et cetera. So have you guys had, I know you're busy, but have you had a chance to do that kind of work?
I mean, we certainly have, when working through FY20 and 21, we felt like, there were things that, that we hadn't really done, that we had sort of in our back pocket, I guess, right, in terms of, the amount of reserves that we would be willing to use. I think that's one of the things that we talked about when we were talking to the Selectmen and the Finance Committee, is that we felt really strongly about the need to cut the budget as much as we could at this point, to avoid using reserves as much as possible, because we didn't know what the impact would be going forward. Right. One of the things that's sort of difficult for us is the fact that the state has not approved an FY21 budget. And so who knows what FY22 will look like. Mm-hmm. We have heard from our delegation that, a lot of what FY22 will look like for the state is really going to be dependent on the federal government. And we all know that we haven't gotten a lot of information there either in terms of, what, well, obviously with the election and we don't know what sort of the relief package will look like post December 31st. So, we certainly continue to work lean, and our message to the department heads has been that they should not expect full restoration of their budgets in FY22, that will happen over multiple fiscal years. And so as we're starting to work on FY22 budgets, we're also watching what's happening at the federal and state level. We have a little more information now that we have received the first quarter of our receipts, but certainly, as you point out, Mike, we don't know if there are other businesses that might not survive the winter. We're not sure. So it's.
I'm happy that stuff's on your radar screen.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know you're thinking about it, and that's good. That's fine. Thank you.
I think Christy hit the nail on the head with the federal and state. We have this ominous date hanging over us at this point, which is 12/30/2020, where they're not sure whether or not they're going to allow us to continue to spend CARES Act money and FEMA money. So there's that deadline almost where we're waiting to, hopefully we will hear from the federal government. I'm assuming it'll be after the election, as to whether or not that date will get extended, because that definitely has the school department is held by that date as well with their reopening grants and things like that. So everyone's kind of waiting on this 12/30/2020 date to find out whether or not that's going to get extended. And obviously, if the pandemic continues and we have an uptick, we're hopeful that date will get extended.
Thank you.
We pretty regularly, we regularly have calls with the state to see sort of where they're at. And there's a lot of discussion about extending beyond that date, but right now it's just discussion. So.
Okay.
I have a quick question also of that general nature, and that is all things being equal, is it safe to assume that free cash won't accumulate as quickly this year as it has in past years because of all the the savings you put in place? So where some of that might have come from jobs unfilled or travel not taken or something like that, you've cut all that. So is that a sort of a safe assumption?
I would say that that's probably a safe assumption to make. I mean, we really did cut budgets, but I really have to applaud the departments, to be perfectly honest. I mean, they really dug in. They didn't spend their money. They didn't rehire people. They went along and to turn back the amount of money that they turned back was just great. I mean, I like I said, I applaud them all for turning back articles, turning back budgets. So I would say that it was an unusual year, and I would not expect that.
I do think that we don't know. We certainly don't know what the winter will bring. And one of the places we found savings, and I'm not sure it's the most significant, but one of the places we found savings was the lack of staff's ability to participate in any sort of training and conferences and things like that. So we did cut some of that in FY21. And so, but we didn't cut it all. And so, as we move forward, we're not sure how that's going to come back for people's ability to be able to, meet in person or go to a conference, which obviously is more expensive than any sort of virtual meetings that they would have.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm talking about this year, accumulation of free cash from this year.
Yeah.
It won't be the same because of everything you've done.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, and also as a reminder, one of the things that closed out to free cash this year, which won't in the future, is the first Pulte payment that we received, which was at $642,000. So based on the stabilization accounts that we set up in June, any future payments will go directly into that stabilization account, and that did close out to free cash this year. which also made it an unusual amount.
I just want to add that I think one of the things I want to be careful about is I don't want to ask you to speculate, given how, and to waste a lot of your time, given how much unknown is going on right now. And so, believe me, I love making predictions and speculating, but it seems like in some ways it's a huge waste of your time, given the great quantity of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So I just want to, be upfront about that, if you could predict what would happen, you could make $1 gazillion right now.
I think though that we're constantly talking about the budget. Leah and I actually met today and we said we didn't even get a break from talking about the budget this year. We've been talking about the budget since last year at this time, and because we have not had sort of a budget that's fully implemented, and so we're constantly reviewing the budget, constantly reviewing department needs in a way that we haven't had to do in the past. So I think it's definitely all on our minds.
No, I totally agree with you, but I think there's a limit to how far ahead of yourself you can get, given how much information is coming in on a day-by-day basis. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that, like, I totally respect that you're on top of the budget, but I don't think I can expect you to tell me what's going to happen in 2025.
So I don't think it's a question that what's going to happen in 2025. I think what I'm asking, if I didn't make myself clear, was my expectation is that those that are in charge of the day-to-day operations and creating budgets for us and doing all the planning have some thought as to what the impacts might be if certain scenarios happen. For example, if the state decides they're going to drastically cut reimbursement, if businesses close. I would rather, I'm not saying they have to sit down with a group of people and go through all these scenario issues, because I think that is right now a waste of time. But I think keeping it on front and center avoids the surprises. So they have at least an idea of an action plan that can be fleshed out if and when it's needed. That's the only thing I'm looking at right now.
There's some thought ahead, but there's a limit to how much.
Agreed, because most businesses don't plan out more than 3 years anyway, and even then it's questionable. So.
Right, thank you. Any other questions regarding the budget or free cash?
No.
Do folks want to move over to the warrant, and then if there are any articles people wanted to ask questions regarding?
I do have a question on Article 14. My understanding is that building manager is going to become the community development director. So my question is, in future years, someday he retires or whatever, is it always going to be the building department, or that position could be from any one of the groups that are being managed?
So this recommendation was part of the staffing study. I'm just pulling up the warrant so I can take a look at it as well. But
it's under 40.
Okay. So it's part of the staffing study. The staffing study also calls for taking a look at the town planner position and its report. Right now it reports directly to the planning board. That might be something that the selectmen want to have a meeting with the planning board to discuss at a future time. And if that were to change, I expect that the planning department would become part of the community development department. And so my shorter answer to your question is no, it doesn't always have to be the building commissioner. But that's who we are proposing to elevate at this time.
Go ahead, Paul. You were going to ask. I'll wait.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I have a question on the golf cart leasing article. And you may not be able to answer this or have thought about it or whatever, but, and I'm afraid maybe the golf committee, because not that I want to own golf carts, but for the town viscerally, it doesn't seem like a good idea. But when we talked about leasing for automobiles for the police, we said that leases would cost us more, and a lot. So cost benefit didn't make sense. Doesn't that also apply to the golf carts, or is there something different?
So I know that the Country Club Operating Committee is actually going to be on your call and later. And Jen and Kim actually have done a lot of work with them on it. This is the model that we've used. I'm not sure, and they can answer this better, that we at this point have the facility to store as many golf carts as we need through the winter. And so, that's one consideration. There's also, we're talking about going to electric golf carts. So that's another consideration. So the reason for the golf cart, I think the intention has always been to lease the golf carts as we have before, especially in this time of transition. But because we saw such a savings with the 5-year lease versus the 3, which they could have done without town meeting approval, we wanted to bring that to town meeting.
Yeah, the Country Club Operating Committee can give you more detail, but the golf cart lease for the carts that we currently use is about $30,000 a year, plus or minus, in that sort of dimension. They usually lease about 25 or 30 carts. You'd be talking $500,000, $300,000 to $500,000 of capital, and who knows what's going to happen in future years. So, at this point, probably the right thing to do is to delay any decision to permanently invest in golf carts.
Yes, I agree. Although 5 years is fairly permanent as well.
It's not a 5-year lease. It's a 1-year lease.
No, it's a 5-year lease.
5-year lease.
Yeah. It was just that, Paul, when they showed us the numbers, the difference between how much it would cost per month for the 5 versus the 3, it was almost silly not to go with the 5. The cost was just that different.
Do we know the life of a golf cart? Is it in that range, 5 years? So the reason that I don't think the golf committee can answer this is because they didn't make the judgment that the police didn't make sense. The cars didn't make sense.
Right. I mean, I expect the wear and tear on a golf cart is significantly less than a police car.
Right.
Yeah, I think we probably ought to wait for the golf club operating committee for this one, if we're getting into the wear and tear on a golf cart.
Okay, if I mentioned I have another meeting, I'm going to try to stay on, but if I don't, if someone might bring that up.
Okay, all right, we'll do.
Thanks.
I had a question on article number 4, the rescinding of the borrowing. One, is this going to become sort of a recurring article?
I think, I don't know that it's going to be at every town meeting, but I think we heard loud and clear at a recent town meeting that the preference is that projects are brought forward on their own merit, and that the vote is for whatever the cost is at the time, as identified at the time, and then if there's any remaining authorization to borrow, that it will be rescinded and not reappropriated to a different project. So I would expect that you'll see this maybe more than we have in the past.
Is there a benefit to, say, the town's bond rating that we've rescinded some of these? So although we hadn't necessarily borrowed the money, because it had been approved, was it being considered when S&P came in or Moody's came in and reviewed us?
So we get reviewed by S&P, but I don't know, is it necessarily was against us because of the fact that normally the phone call, when we discuss this type of thing with them, they'll look at what we have outstanding for capacity and what we have for projects, and they ask us, are we going forward with certain projects? So we tell them, no, we're not going forward with them. So I'm not certain that it went against us, but it does impact our ceiling of what we can borrow. So it definitely is good to get them off the books and clean it up. As the Gibbon School, for instance, that's attributable to the monies that we got from MSBA. And even though we received the monies from MSBA, so you technically, when you think about it, you really shouldn't be borrowing that money because MSBA gave you the money. So, but it doesn't automatically lower. You have to go to town meeting and reduce that. Even though we technically spent the money, it was MSBA's money and not the town of Westborough's money. Gotcha. So you know how we have to authorize the project for the full amount. So that's the amount that we received from MSBA, and we have to lower that and rescind it.
Okay.
Can I do a follow-up on this article? The one on the Mill Road land purchase, I happen to see the Board of Selectmen, but I wonder if you could just brief everybody on where the board, I guess, the Board of Selectmen is on that.
Sure. So the board's going to consider this at a future meeting before town meeting, but basically the town meeting voted to authorize this borrow at the annual town meeting in 2018. And so just in and we haven't been able to get the landowner or the seller to commit to a purchase and sale agreement at this point. And so that's why we haven't used it. And so the board just needs to decide if they want to move forward with it. So that's where we're at. And probably that's what you saw at the meeting, but I don't have any additional information at the town meeting. If they choose not to rescind it, they would just make an amendment to the motion.
Thanks.
I have a question. I'm sorry, Sean.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I have a question on the Affordable Housing Trust. Christy, did Alan reach out to you in the last couple of days about the question of oversight?
The selectman representative.
I'm sorry, Alan Enberg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he reach out to you about that?
Are you talking about the selectman representative voting?
Yes.
Yeah. So he did. And town council's opinion was that since it's required to be a selectman, that they would be able to vote.
Okay.
So I guess, actually, Mike, it might help if you explain the question you had asked and then what the answer is to that. I think other people will be interested.
Yeah.
Well, I think we just got the answer, but the question, I had a conversation with Alan this week because as I read through the article, it indicated that the Board of Selectmen would appoint one board member as their representative trustee. And Paul, as you recall, when Alan made the presentation, there was some conversation regarding oversight. And Alan assured us that given certain circumstances, the Board of Selectmen would have oversight of any actions of the trustees. And when I looked at this and when I read it, I thought that there might be a conflict of interest because in effect, we would have one of the Board of Selectmen having oversight on him or herself, whoever that appointee might be. And I asked if town council had recommended this structure, and they did. And the reason they recommended the structure is because the state law requires that given the way we are creating this or structuring this affordable housing trust, that given the oversight we require by the Board of Selectmen, that there would be necessarily, or it would necessarily be that there has to be a selectman on that Board of Trustees. It's a little complicated, but not that complicated because, so for example, let's just use Alan as an example. If he was the trustee member of the Selectmen and in a trustee meeting, he voted yes, that means that of the remaining selectmen, they already have one yes vote, right? So there's no recusal. He can't say, well, I'm not going to participate as a selectman in the oversight on this. And the same thing would be if he voted no. There would be one no vote from the selectmen. So it gets kind of complicated. My concern was not with the current slate of selectmen and who the future trustees might be, or the soon-to-be named trustees. It was more down the road with the way it was worded. And once people leave their positions, the conversation and the understandings they've all had goes away, usually. And so, but I'm satisfied. I mean, if the town council is, I asked if the town council would provide a statement to go into the articles, but the warrant was already closed. So, but I'm personally, from my concern, I'm fine with that. And hopefully they've thought it through carefully and we're good.
Is it my understanding that the Board of Selectmen overseeing the Affordable Housing Trust is actually an extra layer that isn't required by law?
Correct. In fact, as Alan said to me when they proposed that, the town council said, why do you want to do this? Because most housing trusts have a lot of latitude and autonomy in their decision-making. And, again, when I saw the wording, I said, is this a possibility? And so we checked back and we have the answer. Thank you, Krista.
Sure.
I'm still concerned about the 50%, that they cannot spend more than 50%. I think that's great right now, but, again, over the years, 15 years from now, I'd rather see a dollar cap in there as well, just because 50% of what? It could be millions. It's not a hill.
We need to be clear. I mean, just to be clear, the town meeting will not vote on the details of the terms of the trust. The town meeting will vote on whether or not to create a trust. If you want to change the details of the trust, you're going to have to do it through some other mechanism. We're not asking the town meeting to vote on the details of the trust.
I feel like I can make a recommendation on any article that I'm voting on.
Well, you are voting on the bylaw though, so.
If voting on the bylaw, you could choose not to approve the bylaw.
Right, and it's and what you're talking about is in the bylaw as well. So if in 15 years it's not working, you can certainly amend the bylaw.
Well, that was the part that Alan said, once it's approved, it's much more up to them than to the town.
I think he's talking about the trust documents.
Okay. But we were talking about this specific thing, and he did seem to say that, yeah, that'll be, that won't be something the town meeting can change in the future.
If you start inviting town meeting to get involved in changing a specific line item or a specific sentence in these bylaws and in these trust documents, you're going to create a very difficult situation, because you can't really make those changes without getting town council to approve them and review them, because they may or may not be legal. You got to get, so you probably don't want to try and make those changes on the floor of the town meeting. If we want to change it, we got to try and influence it ahead of time.
It's not something that it's too late, I feel, also for me to be able to try to make that change, but I just want to express concern about it. I'll probably end up, I'm sure I'll vote for it for all the good reasons, but that bothers me, the lack of a cap except in a percentage terms.
Any other questions, or Christy, do you want to make another comment?
No, I was just going to say I have to actually jump off the call, so I'm happy to answer any last questions that anyone has.
You are also well represented, so.
Yes.
Everybody's good? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're a little early for the golf committee, so maybe we'll cover a few things while they get ready.
Thank you.
But Christy, thank you. Leah, thank you. Kim,
Thank you.
Please stay for
Guys.
Thanks, Joel.
All right. do we have everyone here for the golf club operating committee? We could start a little beforehand. We're a little early. I thought I was, they were gonna have to hang out for a while with that 6 o'clock start time, so.
If there,
Katie, are all your folks on board?
Oh, I wasn't, I'm not sure. Is Don on board? Kim?
I don't know. I don't see him, but I don't think I see everybody right now.
We can cover.
I don't see Don. I don't see Don yet. Don Buffard's going to join us because
Yeah.
Don Buffard's aware of a lot of the information.
Right.
Why don't we can cover a few internal matters while we wait for them to show up. So for this town warrant, we have not specifically voted any articles yet. I think maybe we can confirm in terms of the warrant articles. Now we're here to discuss 3, 4, and 8. Pardon me, 3, 7, and 8 with the golf club operating committee. Outside of that, we can go through each of the other items and just confirm that people feel they're ready to vote on those articles and they don't need additional information.
you know what, I have, Sean, one question that I didn't really know I had. And I'm hoping maybe we have enough information here on the committee to answer it. And I'm going back to the purchase of 3 cruisers for the police department. And when I look at the explanation of that, it says the purpose is to replace one of the oldest cruisers, including related equipment. So I certainly understand that. And the second one said to add 2 vehicles to the fleet. So I'm wondering, are we adding 2 new police drivers to the fleet to be driving 2 new police cars? And then the next sentence says we also anticipate increasing the fleet moving forward. We continue to move forward with the approval of the staffing plan. So I guess, are we buying a car ahead of the staffing plan being implemented that would bring the personnel on to actually use the new car? It's a little more detailed than I had considered before.
Right. Or are we having a car fall apart that's due for turnover?
But that's not what the language says. The language, oh, excuse me, if someone, if the.
So, I mean, I did watch the chief thing and assistant. The 2 of these things are not just regular police cars. One is going to be used by the vehicle collision reconstruction guy, whatever it's called. Accident reconstruction. It's a large, more like a Chevy Tahoe or something. And the other one, there was another vehicle that was a similar circumstance. I think it might have been a detective or something. Maybe someone else watched the video too. They could recall.
So there's vehicles. Okay. Okay. So we're replacing.
You met with,
and then we're
Mike,
adding. Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is we're replacing one. We need one for the accident reconstruction folks. And then if one of our cruisers goes down, it creates a management situation and having to move cruisers and people around to cover certain shifts. So, and I think there's a certain amount of anticipation as well, because we did approve the staffing plan, we just haven't implemented all of it. And I think there's an anticipation that some of that will move forward in fiscal 22.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Kim.
If I may, I was just pulling up my notes from the capital planning process last year. My understanding is that they have added staff. They've started implementing the additional staff, and there is a need for a vehicle to, they have not yet added the vehicles based on the staffing that they've added. So it is in part to keep up with the additional staffing.
Gotcha. Kim, thank you. Jody, do you feel like you got enough information there, or do
Yeah,
you want to follow up on
it's a bit
other?
of I mean, I want to support their planning. I feel like there's potentially a little bit of cart before the horse going on here. But now I understand what the plan is, and that's good.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I believe Dave Hall and Don Befort are on board. So Katie, if you're ready to go, maybe we can move to going through those articles.
We've got 3 articles coming up, the main one being changing the golf management operation from a contract for service to an employee model. Back in September, we sought the approval from the Board of Selectmen. And basically, what started this obviously is, many of you may know, Jack is retiring after 31 plus years of operating the golf course and everything along with it. So the operating committee felt this was an opportune time to go forward and implement findings that was conducted by the Golf Study Committee and submitted in 2018. Primarily, the change was sought, to feel that it was best suited to deliver the mission statement for the golf course, and that would be to offer a quality golf course for players of all abilities and to maintain a sound financial position. Also, we could offer a variety of programs for families, adults, juniors, seniors, and now have a greater outreach through the rec department. And simultaneously, we could encourage off-season recreation activities on the property. Under this model, all revenues will go to the town via the enterprise fund, whereas a contract model can kind of jeopardize the quality of the operation because the profit motive can sometimes conflict with the mission statement. So we began working with the town departments to identify all the steps and logistics to accomplish the transition. And Don and Kim have, some details obviously on that with the budget, which I'm sure you're eager to hear about. Just as an aside, I just want you to know the golf interest in play has been increased throughout the industry this past year with COVID. It's one of the safe activities that people could do. In fact, Westborough recently surpassed $300,000 in income with greens fee play, which is far surpasses anything that we've seen before. So why don't I turn it over to Don and Kim to talk about the transfer of monies of how to, from the enterprise fund to fund the manager and the concurrent staffing positions.
Kim, do you want to start off, or do you want me to start off? How do you want to do this?
Feel free to go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Let me just tab over the new budget, the budget addition of 75,709 represents the second half of the fiscal year 21 budget under the employee model. We went through all of the categories of expense that we would need to do. There's additional personnel expense, and I'll leave that to Kim. I'll go more on the operating side. We have to provide for in the budget for the cart rental. That's something that we have not done before. There are other miscellaneous expenses, like we make money when somebody signs up to get a handicap fee from Mass Golf, but we have to budget, and in this case, we budgeted $6,000 for next spring, but we're going to take in approximately $7,500. But under the quirks of municipal budgeting, we won't see that income until the June 30, 2021 numbers are finalized. So there are a number of items like that. We have to provide the material for the pro shop, golf balls, all of the items that a golfer would want, gloves, miscellaneous items. We have also added a budget item for a cleaning contract. This is something that we have not done before. We are hoping to include the locker room cleaning in the job description for the pro shop, but we thought it advisable to at least prepare a budget item that would cover that if we have to contract that out. There are a couple of other items. I think that's about it. That's there's some parts and supplies. There's some minor items, but those are the hard items. Kim, do you want to do the personnel?
Sure. I think one of the ways that I had to get my head around this when we started looking into, we're transitioning mid-budget year, which creates a few challenges. And what we're really doing is we're recognizing, we have to recognize expenses and revenues on the town's budget worksheet that are expenses and revenues that have previously existed for the most part, but they were handled by under the contract by the Golf Pro. So I wanted to be clear about that. We've really worked off of, what were those expenses and revenues that existed and how do we bring them into our budget model? And one of the biggest areas that didn't show up on our budget worksheet was related to staffing expenses. The Golf Pro, we had an expense line for the contract amount, but he was responsible for hiring the staff who worked throughout the season and took on all of the related expenses, unemployment, all of the things that come with staffing. So we put together a model, determined what we believe to be a adequate number of hours that we would be looking to hire seasonal staff who would work from the March to the probably, October, November timeframe, depending on the weather. We're looking at these as seasonal positions, a mix of and by seasonal, I mean, they're not permanent. Part-time, some of them may be full-time, but everything would fall under the threshold for being benefit eligible. So we figured out what those expenses would look like. We also did classify the golf manager position, and we do need to, so we recognize those expenses. We have an ad out right now for a golf manager. We anticipate doing interviews in the coming weeks, getting that process underway to hopefully have somebody on board at the beginning of January. And the expenses that we have, I believe we have them, I'm not quite sure what you may have in front of you, but we're looking at an annual salary for the manager of around $70,000. We only need to budget for half of that in the coming, the balance of FY21. And we're also able to allocate, before I get to that. So the manager, we're assuming it's a $70,000 annual salary, and the annual cost for the hourly employees is just about $74,000. We're only needing to budget about $33,000 for the balance of fiscal 21 based on the number of months of the season that fall in the rest of the fiscal year. So we're very comfortable with how we arrived at those numbers. I just want to let you know and she's on the call somewhere, Jen Kirkland, the recreation director, will be, the position will be under the recreation director. The golf manager will report through the recreation director. And we'll also be able to allocate some additional administrative support, both through Jen at the management level, as well as through staff in her office as we transition. I guess maybe I'll stop there. I don't know if there are any specific questions that either I could answer, Don, Katie, Jen.
Kim, this is Hank Roush. The number that's the transfer number or the spend number that we're increasing that's in the warrant article number 3 is $90,709. based on the description, I'm assuming that covers all the expenses that you're going to incur between January 1 of 2021 and July 1 of 2021, i.e. the remainder of the fiscal year. So you got salaries in there, you've got purchasing inventory, you've got expenses to rent carts, a whole bunch of things of that sort that are all wrapped up in that one big number of 90,000.
That is correct.
And it also, so because we're making the transition mid-year, we're basically the golf professional budget line in the approved fiscal year 2021 budget was just shy of $70,000. But because his contract is ending mid-year, we've got, if you will, $35,000 in savings in that line.
Right.
So it's really a wash. It's between the savings from his contract, we're applying that to the manager position, but we have to show it differently based on the way our expense, you know, our staff and expense lines show up.
I had a question. So it's coming out of retained earnings. Will retained earnings exist as a category going forward for the country club, and there'll just be other items, just not the Golf Pros budget in there? Or?
Well, that brings up an interesting question, because the annualized budget is a little bit higher than twice what you're seeing, because only about 40% of our income comes in the first half of the year. So we've weighted that expenses to reflect 40. We are starting out with approximately $123,000 of retained earnings in the enterprise fund. We're using up $8,000 of it now. So when we come visit you to discuss the 22 budget, we'll only have about $30,000 in that account. And our expenses will go up substantially in fiscal year 22. And again, this is the difficulty of dealing with June 30, 2020 numbers when doing the fiscal 22 year budget, because obviously we won't have the 6/30/21 numbers when we go to annual town meeting. So I think I would recommend that we set aside a substantial amount of time as we go through the FY22 budget to go into detail. We are going to have to work together on this, because clearly there are not enough retained earnings to cover the budget increase for FY22. But I don't want to get too far, too far ahead of the discussion. But to answer your question, we will have $30,000 left in the retained earnings. We are outperforming. I've estimated that when Ms. Talbot looks at the numbers on June 30, 2021, we'll probably add another $20,000 to $30,000. Last year, we outperformed dramatically because we had such an outstanding May and June. This year, I've tempered my enthusiasm for forecasting next year. So as we sit tonight, we're $30,000 ahead fiscal year to date, and I use the first half of 2019 in my forecast. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
If I can just very briefly, I think, again, it's the transition year. Yes, Don is absolutely correct. We're going to recognize additional expenses that we haven't seen in the past, but it's the revenues. We're expecting the revenues to be there to support those expenses. It's just the timing of how we recognize things, and particularly during the transition year. So we're comfortable that looking at, again, stepping back from the timing of when we recognize things, we're very hopeful that based on the solid performance this year and being able to look carefully at how we put the budget together next year, that the operation will be self-sufficient. The other piece is we've had Don and Katie and Jen and I spend a lot of time crafting a job description for a manager. that is very focused on someone who is, they're not spending their time, doing the teaching aspect, they're actually managing. And a big part of that is to try and drive membership and other revenue generating activities of the club. So, we're hopeful that we're queuing this up for a really strong start under the new model. And I think it's been very, I'm looking for the silver lining. I'm home today with a 5 and a 7-year-old, so I try to find a silver lining in everything COVID related. And I think with the golf course, the benefit and the fact that that's something people have been able to get out and enjoy and do. It's been great for the people who can use it, and it's been great for the club on the revenue side. So, we're really excited to be moving to this new model.
Thank you. Any other questions on Article 3? Do folks have questions on Articles 7 or 8? I think 7 is sort of territory we covered from in the spring, but. Oh, and Paul, did you want to bring up a follow-up question on number 8?
Yes, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question just about, and I was actually asking other, the financial people in town more, because when the lease arrangement came up for police cars, they did the analysis and said that, that it's better to buy them because, nothing's the same, but and I wondered if the same analysis was done. Not that I think the town should own golf carts, but still, was there sort of an analysis of, or at least a thought about whether to buy them, or what are the reasons that lease is the proper thing, and why 5 and not 3 years? Thank you.
Maybe, I think your cost would probably be pretty prohibitive to go ahead and look to purchase them outright. But what we are looking to do, and what Don has put into the budget, is go with electric carts. And there are a few companies that are on the state bid list. What we found, the difference between, it was over $50,000, 55 plus, I think, in savings, going from a 3-year to a 5-year. And we don't have the actual formal bids as of yet, but there, we might look to put in like $1 buyout on some of them at the end of 5 years. You do have the cost of battery replacement with electric carts, but obviously for efficiency and environmental and whatnot, that's a better option to go.
So it's 50,000 over 5 years?
Yes, between a 3-year to a 5-year lease.
Right. And the reasons not to buy are not really necessarily financial, but flexibility and storage and things like that.
This is Don. It is an interesting question. When Auburn went through this process a number of years ago for their municipal golf course, they decided to buy carts and also buy equipment. We need approximately 30. We're actually leasing 32. It would cost about $300,000 to buy them. And that would mean a bonding article of some type, which we would repay. But it just seems that the course has leased for many years. And we think, especially during this transition time, that might be a safer way for us to go. Ultimately, I would like to see us have a smaller fleet of rented vehicles and to purchase older vehicles as we go along. And if we're financially successful, we'll have some funds to do that. The current manager leases 24, and he owns outright 16 that he's acquired over the years. So he's extremely efficient in how he runs the course. I think I would like to see us do that, but it's premature, I think, to try that. But I think your comment, buy or lease, if the carts last a long time, you're clearly better off to buy I think as we're going into a little bit of an experimental phase with electric carts, this might be the safer way for us to go.
Another quick question. It came up. I think it must be in the other article, but I'm not sure. I saw it at one of the other meetings about the buying the inventory, I think, from the former. And I'm wondering, I would assume that we've determined that that's not inventory that, you know, has been sitting around a long time that we can't get rid of type of thing. It's you know, sellable stuff, or that it's been properly discounted or something.
I think we will, the pro is trying to sell as much of what he has as he can. He runs a program with the golfers where they get credits from winnings in tournaments, and then they cash in their winnings with him. I suspect as we get closer to the end of the year, he will have less and less stuff. But, you know, if he has, let's say, $2,000 worth of golf balls and gloves that he's willing to sell to us at a cost lower than we would pay wholesale, I certainly would recommend that we go ahead and do that. And this budget will give us the money to do that. So if we can get them cheaper from Jack, we will. If we can get them cheaper starting from scratch with new vendors, we'll do it that way.
Great. That sounds great. Thank you.
Any other questions for the Golf Club Operating Committee?
So this is Andrew. I remember several years back there was a $30,000 investment, I think it was, in marketing to get to see if they could drive more business. And you've talked about it being a really successful time recently. Do we know what kind of utilization of the tee time inventory we have at this point, or how much growth opportunity there is, and whether or not it should be bolstered or backed up by marketing if we found that successful?
Very good point. I think if you have an opportunity, go to the website and look at the job description. And I think Kim did a really excellent job of explaining what we're trying to do without getting too far into the weeds. But I watch the tee sheet several times a week. And I think that with perhaps a more tech-savvy staff, we might be able to be more efficient in our tee times. And, you know, I say that with all due respect to Mr. Negotian, but there is room for improvement.
Thank you.
I have a quick question on the greens mower.
Yeah.
What's the life expectancy of that equipment?
We've had some mowers that last how old is this mower? The current one that is broken down. I think it's been going on 10 years.
Yeah, Katie, I think I heard I think I heard Mike tell us that the mower was more than 10 years old.
Basically, he usually refers to things in terms of hours, you know, used, and then usually gives the equivalent of what that would be in years or a car's life or something along that line. But this has been about 8 to 10 years. It's a dedicated mower, obviously, just, you know, to the greens. And
Katie?
Yep.
Excuse me just a minute. That mower is a 2004?
Yep.
So it's 16 years old.
16.
And there is not much left.
No.
Got your money's worth.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
What are you doing with the old one?
He's going to convert it and use it as a supplemental mower for some of the tees and the surround areas around the greens and the tees. So he's pretty good at improvising, and that's his plan. So that he doesn't have a backup now, which scares him. But replacing this next spring will be a big benefit to the superintendent.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you taking the time to come to our meeting.
Thanks for
Katie,
having us.
Don, all
Thanks
of you,
for
thank you
having
all
us.
very much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Ed.
Enjoy the rest
Thank
of your
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say that to not have a backup tea green mower in the in the age of COVID seems like a very pleasantly Westborough problem to have.
All right. So we can go through the articles and just confirm that we're sort of ready to vote on everything. I think we covered the cruisers a little while earlier. Is everybody okay with the command car for the fire department? Are there any questions on that? I think they did discuss it with us back in the spring as well. Okay. All right. So do we want to just start taking motions from the top?
I think and then if we go through article by article and we find there's one we want more information on, that would be the way to find out.
That sounds good. All right. So we need a motion on Article 1.
Okay. I will make a motion that the AFC vote to support Article 1, prior year's bills from the Board of Health.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions on Article 1? Any debate?
This is just John, just a suggestion that might make this easier since Christie had sent out the draft motions. You may want to just have that document open and maybe have people make recommendations to essentially recommend in favor or against the draft motion.
Right.
That might make it easier than each person trying to craft their own how they're going to word it.
Also, I'm going to say this one should have had the sum in it. It's to,
Right.
you know.
I'm going to I'll pull up, I printed up the motion.
Jody, if you're willing, I'll make the motion. You second it.
I have it in front.
Oh, okay, fine.
Okay, I move to transfer from free cash the sum of $1,080 for the purposes of the article as printed in the warrant.
I would just say you move to recommend that the town transfer. I know that we're one step ahead of it here. So just trying to make this easy. So whoever's transcribing the motions probably just start each of them with I move that we recommend that the town blah blah blah. Just trying to help. Sorry.
Unless somebody has motions that I don't, we only have two motions.
Well,
We only have the document that was sent out by the town manager only has motions for two articles. None of the rest are in there.
Okay.
Two separate documents. Wait, sorry, I am out there. We have two separate documents. One was sent out October 13th, which is the warrant. And then we got a list of documents today that was motions without the warrant.
Who sent that one out?
Hank, I sent that about 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's the one that I brought up, and it only has two motions in it.
I see all the motions.
Well, I'll go back and bring it up again. Sorry, it must be
That's
me.
okay. It prints out to 3 pages.
Yeah, the warrant of the 13th has a lot of motions.
All right, I'm going to try.
One second. The one that was sent out today is the most recent motions. Work off of today's.
Except it doesn't have the rest of it. It was an incomplete document.
It came at 4:15 today.
But it's not complete articles, is it?
No, it's just the motions.
Yeah, so I like having the warrant open.
Okay.
To match.
That's okay. You can review the warrant. But ultimately, we vote on the motion.
So I printed the warrant, which was sent previously this week. And then when there's something that came in at 4:15 today, and I printed that 3-page document. So I've got the warrant sitting in front of me, and I have got the 3 pages of motions sitting in front of me. Right. So I'm going to make a motion. I move to recommend for Article 1 to transfer from free cash $1,080 for the purpose of the article as printed in the warrant.
Second.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we have any discussion? No? Okay. I will take a roll call vote. All right, Ms. Hensley.
Yes, yes.
All right, Ms. Board.
Ward, yes.
Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. Okay, 900. One down, 13 to go.
Nicely done.
Article 2.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it if you want.
Sounds
So
good.
I move to recommend Article 2, fiscal year 2021 operating budget adjustments. This is from the Board of Selectmen. So the motion will be to raise and appropriate the following sums of money. $56,750 for the purposes of increasing the fire department salary and wages to fund the fire department union contracts. $59,195 for the purpose of increasing the school department budget to fund labor contracts. $36,500 for the purpose of increasing the economic development salary and wages to fund economic development coordinator position. $15,032 for the purpose of increasing the Department of Public Works salary and wages to fund the DPW labor position. $37,200 for the purpose of increasing the police department's salary and wages to fund one additional police position. $30,000 for the purpose of increasing the legal services budget, and $8,000 for the purpose of increasing town buildings and grounds expenses. And further to transfer the sum of $51,320 from water enterprise salary and wages to water enterprise expense.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on Article 2? Okay. Seeing none. All right, we'll go to a roll call vote. Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Board.
Board, yes.
Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush.
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 900 on Article 2. Article 3.
Does anybody else want to take a stab at it?
You're
All right,
on
I'm
a
happy.
roll, Jody.
All right. Okay, I've got the motions in front of me that came out at 4:06 today. Okay, I move to recommend that AFC support Article 3 FY 2021 Country Club Operating Committee budget adjustment. This was from the Country Club Operating Committee. That we transfer, they transfer the sum of $64,494 from Country Club retained earnings to the FY 2021 Country Club operating salary and wages, and to transfer the sum of $26,015 from Country Club retained earnings to the FY 2021 Country Club operating expenses for the purpose of restructuring the management of the golf course.
Bradley, second.
Second. Thank you, Andrew. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Great. Roll call vote. Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Board.
Board, yes.
Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush.
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 900. Article 4.
All right, combine this a little bit. I'm going to move
To recommend the town,
to recommend Article 4, rescind borrowing from the Board of Selectmen as written in the warrant. Yeah, I don't have, I don't have the listed table that's in the, in the warrant itself.
I have the table, but I think if you say recommend the town vote to rescind as printed in the warrant.
I think that's fine. That will be the motion.
Bradley second.
Bradley second, thank you very much. Do we have any discussion on Article 4? Okay. Roll call vote. Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Board,
Board, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush. Oh, there he comes.
Roush, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had to get off mute.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 900. Okay. Article 5, the appropriation of Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund.
I move that we vote to recommend the appropriation of the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund as brought forward by DPW to transfer from receipts reserves and appropriate $9,122.70 for the purposes stated in the article as printed in the warrant.
I'm sorry, what was the amount you said?
It was $9,122.70. Yep.
All right, do we have a second?
Bradley second.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, the roll call vote, Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford,
Board, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
and Keo, yes. 900. Okay. With Article 6, so the motion as printed at the motion that was printed has a typo in it before we go through it here. If you go down to the bottom of the motion, after Article I, second line from the bottom, it then says, and transfer from pre-cash the sum of $79,000 for the purpose, and that should be Article 6J. And then I think after that needs to be scratched out. Do you see where I'm
Yep.
saying that? And then I think it's good. I think they accidentally just pasted in there a couple times.
So the 150,000, 55,000 is going away? Wait a minute.
That is actually above
Oh, it's
in Article I.
6J should be the parking and curbing. Parking lot and curbing repairs.
79,000, yep, and that is 6J.
Yeah.
So I think if you just replace on the last line, replace the H with a J and scratch out after that, you're good.
Yep.
So before we also dance, I noticed that the J in the version 6 of the version 5 of the warrant is only for 70,000, but the motion's for 79,000.
You're right. And what does it say on our spreadsheet here?
Well, we're working off version 8 of the warrant. So which one were you asking about?
Oh,
No, 6J.
gotcha.
6J says 70,000. 6H says 79.
Right. So thank you, Andrew. So
And please make Christie aware that there's a typo in that motion so she can fix it.
Yeah.
So we don't have to do this at town meeting.
Victor, yeah. So on the second line from the bottom where it says 79, that should be 70.
If we're on version 8 of the warrant, when's the warrant closed?
It's closed.
I thought version 5 was the closed version.
Nope.
No.
Version
Well,
8's the one I
it'd be
got.
nice if the finance committee got a copy of the closed version.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm still working off of 5. That's the last one I ever saw.
Well, today's emails had version 8, I believe, the Christie sent along. The reason why, what happened is the selectmen didn't close the warrant last Tuesday. They closed it 2 days ago. So there was an email somewhere about it, some articles being added.
Yeah, so she forwarded that to me on Tuesday.
Yep.
Did I send it out Tuesday night or Wednesday morning?
Yeah, and that's what, we got that in the package that came out on Tuesday, then we got the minutes that came out on Wednesday, and then we got the motions and the final warrant or version 8 of the warrant today at just after 4 o'clock.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so the change to the motion is at the end, it should say 70,000 for the purpose of Article J.
Did you say we got an email that has version 8?
It was either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning from me.
Here it came, let me see.
I got motions.
This is yesterday at 7:37 PM. Thank you all. And the attachments were, let me see. I'm looking. Here we go. Yeah, the attachments that came yesterday at 7:37 PM included.
So the email I see from 9/18, actually I'm seeing the version 8 of the document. It was an email that was arrived that I got at around 9:18.
This morning or last night?
This morning. And it included the agenda, as well as the spreadsheet and budget.
Okay, mine said Seymour. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it went out last night, but it may not have arrived in people's inboxes.
Yeah, I got Wednesday night at 7:38 PM.
Yep.
The confusion is you originally sent it at 7:37 and then you replied to everybody to say you forgot to attach the agenda at 9 o'clock. You look at the whole thread, they were both times.
But when I search my messages for Sean, everything he sent me in the last couple of days comes right up.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way on my system just because they stack.
Yeah.
That's what you need to know when things came in.
Yeah, I can search my iPhone pretty quickly on these.
Right. I don't.
Bottom line is we have Rev 8 for version 8.
Yep.
But Article 6, from what I can tell, didn't change.
Yep. So this one, we usually vote each of the items separately. We don't vote it as a slate. Usually in our R&R booklet, it has a recommendation on each of the items. So should the motions come one line at a time then?
I think so.
Okay. All right, I'll give it a try. I vote that we recommend under the Capital Improvement Plan, Article 6A, to transfer from free cash and appropriate the sum of $70,000 for the purposes of Article 6A, and 6A is the utility truck replacement.
We have a second.
Leslie, second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? All right, roll call vote. Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Board,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
I got, yeah, Roush, yes.
thank you. Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 6A is 900.
All right. The next item is the infrastructure data collection. That's 6B. So I move that we vote to recommend the transfer from free cash and appropriate the sum of $10,000, transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $10,000, and further transfer from water retained earnings the sum of $10,000 for the purposes of Article B, infrastructure data collection.
Can you add the 6? So 6B?
6B, thank you, 6B.
Sorry.
Nope. Do we get a
Second.
second? Thank you very much. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. Ms. Hensley?
Okay, we're moving on to 6C.
No, we have to
Oh,
go.
we got a vote still.
Oh, Hensley, yes.
Unfortunately.
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Yep.
Sorry.
nope. Mr. Hugel,
Problems
Yes.
with this
Mr.
all
Bradley.
together.
Nope. Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
yep, thank you. Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes, 900. Now on to 6C.
All right, 6C. This is the 6C is at the end of the motion, but okay, 6C, it, just so we know, is the 10-wheel sander replacement. So I vote to recommend the transfer from free cash and appropriate the sum of $80,000, transfer from sewer retained earnings and the sum of $80,000, and further transfer from water retained earnings the sum of $80,000 for the purposes of Article 6C, 10-wheel sander replacement.
Thank you.
Leslie, second.
Second, thank you very much. Any discussion? No? Okay. Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Mr. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Yeah, I know. I was going to let it slide.
thank you. Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Ms. Keo, yes. Okay. Next, 900. 6D.
Okay, we're on to 6D, which is the backhoe replacement. So I move that we recommend to transfer free cash the sum of $45,000, transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $55,000, and further transfer from water retained earnings the sum of $55,000 for the purposes of Article D, backhoe replacement.
Bradley, second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. Ms. Hensley,
Yes. Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 900. 6E.
All right, 6E is the generator replacement at the sewer pump station. So I move that we recommend to transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $35,000 for the purpose of Article 6E, which is generator replacement at the sewer pump station.
Second.
Second, thank you. Discussion?
I have a question.
Sure.
So it also says, or appropriate such other amount. Are we anticipating an other amount?
That's boilerplate wording.
Yeah, they'll leave that just in case somebody does want to make a suggestion for a different amount, say between the warrant and the meeting, there's new information, then they could change the motion. In this case, we're not expecting that.
Okay, thanks.
If you go back and look, it's actually in a bunch of the articles.
Sort of leave stuff open-ended just in case. All right. Okay, thank you. Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes?
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 900. 6F.
Okay, 6F is the sewer grinder. I move that we recommend to transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $60,000 for the purposes of Article 6E, 6F, no, 6E.
6F.
It's 6F, okay.
Yep.
Sewer grinder. Is that it? Okay, hold on then. 6F, we're already done. Let's look at 6F again. The article's at the end of the sentence, so I'm going to reframe my motion for 6F, sewer grinder. I move that we recommend to transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $60,000 for the purpose of Article 6F, which is the sewer grinder.
Second.
Second, thank you. Discussion?
So this is Andrew. In the past, when they've talked about the sewer grinders, I remember them having done a presentation that talked about how many incidences had happened at each of the individual pumps where sewer grinders were going to be installed that required significant manual intervention. And I don't remember that part of this grinder replacement, but I am concerned that we're just blindly putting in sewer grinders at $60,000 for equipment at each of the places that are no longer as high use as other facilities going forward. So as I say this, I realize that other people may have opinions about this, and I would welcome feedback as to where I may not be thinking on this issue as clearly as others might.
I believe when they came forward initially, this was part of the plan, was eventually these grinders would be in every location, and that for the benefit of the town, rather than implementing several $1 million worth of them all at once, we were doing them in each cycle to eventually have them all done, because it's multiple things or benefits in terms of safety of the people working on them, and functionality of the sewers themselves. So the goal is to get them in every site.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember, Andrew, I think back in March or February, you made this point as well to the DPW director at that time, because this may be the third or fourth one that they've done, and certainly they're doing them on the installations that need them the most. And
yep.
Was there a declining sort of return on these? And I don't know if, come the spring or something, maybe he can give you something that sort of represents, the number of man hours involved with each of these.
Yeah, because I'm not sure. I don't remember a plan to do it, because we have something like 30 or 40 pumps, and each of these things lasts 20 years. So that would mean at some point we're going to be buying 2 of these at a time for replacement. So we're now paying $120,000 in some years as we start churning through these. So it seems to me that there's going to be a diminishing return, and realizing that replacing these backups and problems, that's crud work. I totally get that, but that's crud work that's been done by DPWs around this country since forever until the invention of the grinder pump. And I'm sort of reluctant about putting in an infrastructure of 60,000 times 30 pumps that are just going to need to be churned over year after year after year. It just seems expensive to me.
Right.
And if anybody else feels differently, I absolutely love another piece of input on this. Am I being too stingy about this? Am I overlooking a health concern about this?
I mean, Andrew, if what we're questioning is the long-term, whether this is the correct long-term solution for the problem, that's an engineering question, and we ought to get the engineering people in to talk to us about why they're convinced that this is the best long-term solution for an ongoing problem.
Well, and that's a byproduct of the conversations we have every year when the DPW comes in. But I feel like I just keep running this one up the flagpole, and if somebody thinks that I'm doing this, because I'm missing some piece of information that would sell me on this, then I would love that feedback. If the right course of action is just to do this yearly as we talk to DPW, that's another story.
So, at presentations a long time ago, that was essentially the plan. The problem is Hank and I may have been on the board then, and nobody else who is sitting on the board currently may have heard that plan, because we actually talked about doing more at the time, decided to, that this was a safe stretch at that point.
I remember that coming up, coming up as well. I didn't think they were optional. I mean, I thought there's debris, there's towels, there's God knows what that ends up
and
in
employee safety. I mean, what threw me
was optional.
was when something goes wrong, it's extremely unsafe for the employees as well.
So Andrew, I think, so I'm sure they're doing asking for about one of these a year right now. So it'll come up again at your capital expenditure planning committee in, a few weeks. I think we're still in the earlier stages of this, so I'm definitely still on board with this one.
Yep.
But you're right. When does it not become as effective, or is it the cost doesn't justify it? It's new management at the DPW. So I think if you raise this now, they may be able to collect data that supports either doing this or
Right.
So
okay.
I think it's worth raising it the next capital expenditure.
And I think at one point we were doing 2 a year.
Possibly.
Not in the couple of years I've been doing this. So we've been doing this, to the best of my knowledge, about 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I think it's more than 3. But so I'm taking cycles from this conversation here when I'm hearing that this is really a better conversation to be raised with engineering, DPW. Not about this. I'm with you. I'm in support of this, and I'm going to vote in support of this. I'll raise the question in a forum with the right people to answer the question. So I thank you very much for this open conversation.
Any other questions?
Who seconded the motion, please?
Second?
Beth?
Sure.
All right. So we'll go to votes. Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Board.
Board, yes.
Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush.
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. That was 6F900. 6G. Oh, Jody, did you want to make another motion, or are you?
Let's look at 6G then. That's the F350 utility truck with plow. So I move to recommend the transfer from sewer retained earnings, the sum of $40,000, and transfer from water retained earnings, the sum of $40,000, for the purposes of Article 6G, which is F-350 utility truck with plow.
We have a second.
Bradley, second.
Oh, yeah, heard a couple. Go to Andrew. Okay. Any questions on the utility truck? Okay. Seeing none. Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes, 900. 6H.
All right, 6H is next. 6H is the command vehicle replacement. This is from the fire department. So I move to recommend transfer from free cash the sum of $79,000 for the purpose of Article 6H, and that's command vehicle replacement.
Do I have a second?
What was the amount? I thought it was 79,000.
79. Oh, did you not say 79,000?
9,000.
Bradley, second.
Okay. Any discussion? No? All right. We'll call vote. Ms. Hensley.
All right, the 6I, oh, no, this is a
voting.
yes, I am a yes.
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yep.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. All right. Now 6I. You're on
All
a
right.
roll.
6I, okay? 6I is purchase of 3 cruisers from the police department. So I move to recommend transfer from free cash of the sum of $155,000 for the purpose of Article 6I, purchase of 3 cruisers.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Beth. Any discussion?
Should we hold off on this one until we clarify what exactly is going on from the original plan of cruisers and the cruisers people match? Or did we convince ourselves earlier that it's correct? I mean, like, it's obviously correct, but that we're comfortable.
Yeah. And while we do a quick review, I think it might have been Walter who said it was 1 replacement and then the other 2 were really net new for specific purposes, I think, and Mike was saying this.
Yeah, and Kim added that they had hired, one was for a hire they made in accordance with the the staffing study.
Okay.
Yep. But Beth, are you good or?
I'm essentially good. I mean, there's a little bit of me going like, okay, where are they in, because within good reason, the staffing study and the, projections all got delayed. And I'm sort of not caught up on the match yet, if that makes sense.
Right.
But
So am I
guess
Pardon
the
me.
other piece of it is, is there such a delay between the time you order a vehicle that you could have hired a police officer in the meantime, and then you're ready to go? And that's one of the pieces that I'm also willing to put out there as, fuzzy in my brain.
If we've got detailed questions, I would recommend we ask our liaison to talk with the chief of police and bring the answer to the next meeting.
I'll do that. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Just hold this over until the next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will also say a big part of this discussion, I think, gets answered once the capital equipment survey has been done, because I think we take a very narrow view on answering the question about the 3 cars and the 40 people and et cetera. But I've heard that there's a large inventory of cars that we may not be utilizing properly. But I'm not going to believe that source until I hear or see what the actual capital inventory report of everything that the police have. So just a thought as we consider this question.
So can I ask Mike if you're going to follow up on this?
Yeah, I will. I'll call the chief and follow up. Not a problem at all.
Okay, so based on what I learned tonight and what was written, the way the article is written, that we've got one of these new vehicles coming in to replace a dilapidated vehicle that's got to go. And then we have two new vehicles coming in that are special equipment. So my question then becomes, what happens to those two other, those two other vehicles that they ostensibly will be replacing? And if this is dependent on the staffing study actually moving forward, and all of our discussions are what is the budget going to look like next year, we don't know if we'll be increasing staff next year. So are we going to end up with two unused vehicles sitting there? And does that make sense as backup vehicles? That's the gist of my question.
Okay,
Jody, I believe what we've been told is, if you look at the warrant article, it clearly says we're going to have a net add to the fleet of two units. We also have had the conversations that said we had planned on hiring 3 officers this year. We held off on 2 of them. We hired one of them in the spring, and we're hiring the second one in the second half of the year.
Yep. All right. So we'll get an update at our next meeting, and then we'll be prepared to vote.
Yeah, I'll record this in the minutes as held over pending information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. 6J.
So we're moving to 6J. And 6J is the parking lot and curbing repairs and maintenance. This is from the school department. So let's recommend to transfer from free cash the sum of $70,000 for the purpose of Article 6J, which is parking lot and curbing repairs and maintenance.
Bradley, second.
All right. Thank you. Any questions regarding this?
My only comment is that this was easily let go in the spring, and I haven't heard anything about it since. And I haven't, sorry, maybe I missed something in the meetings, but I feel like, I don't know how urgent this is. So I think I'll vote abstain, just to not shock you that we're not all yeses.
Do you want the school committee to come and present on it, or us to ask them more questions about it?
No, because I don't want to waste their time doing that, no.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or 6J? All right. True. All right. Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford.
Abstain.
Okay. Ms. Blumberg.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Abstain.
Mr. Beretti.
No.
Mr. Leslie.
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 612. And so that was Hugel and Board abstaining and Beretti against. Mike.
Yep.
I don't know if you need to mention that specifically. Okay. All right. Article 7. Greens mower now.
Anybody want the opportunity to make a motion? I'm happy to carry the ball if you want me to. I've got it all in front of me. All right. So we are at Article 7, which is the greens mower, which was brought to us by the Country Club Operating Committee. So I move to recommend to transfer from free cash the sum of $46,000 for the purpose of the articles as printed in the warrant.
All right.
Leslie, second.
Thank you very much. Any questions or discussion? Okay. Ms. Hensley.
Yes, Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
No.
no. Mr. Beretti,
No.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 720. Okay. Article 8.
Okay, Article 8 is the golf course lease term, or the golf cart lease term. This is brought to us by the Country Club Operating Committee. I move that we recommend the town vote to authorize a lease agreement for 5 years for purposes of the article as printed in the warrant. Golf cart lease term.
Right. Do we have a second?
Leslie, second.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion?
Do we
None?
know, or do we have any information with regard to if we don't fulfill the lease? What the ramifications or the,
That's a matter for the negotiation by the selectmen. Leases generally include cancellation terms.
Yes.
There's generally a financial penalty for early cancellation, but that's up to the selectmen to do that negotiation. And then the impact of that comes onto the operating budget for the golf club.
Right. Plus, the other thing is they can negotiate a lease up to 3 years without town meeting approval. It was to save money, they went to 5 years.
Right. So we're just giving them agreeing the ability to go out to 5 years is all. Right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford, Ms. Ford,
sorry, yes.
it's okay. Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. 900 on Article 8. Article 9.
All right, Article 9 is the town water system improvements. This came to us from the DPW. This is a long motion. So I move to recommend that the town appropriate the sum of $1.98 million for the design, construction, installation, upgrading, and/or replacement of water mains and all associated work for various roads and costs incidental to or related thereto, that to meet this appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 8, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore, and that any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved in this vote in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. And further, to authorize the Board of Selectmen and appropriate town officers to enter into all agreements and execute any and all instruments, and to take all related actions necessary or appropriate to affect the foregoing. So that was for town water system improvements.
Right. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Bradley, second.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. Any questions on Article 9? Right. Seeing none. Okay. Ms. Hensley?
Yes? Hensley,
Ms. Ford?
yes.
Ms. Ford?
Ford, yes.
Ms.
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush?
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. So 900 on Article 9.
Are we ready for 10, Article 10?
Yes. Thank you.
All right, Article 10 is the Westborough Affordable Housing Trust brought to us by the Board of Selectmen. So I move to recommend that the article, that we support the article as printed in the warrant. I move to recommend the article as printed in the warrant.
Is that a
Westborough
township
Affordable
vote?
Housing.
Oh, sorry. Somebody second.
Well, is this normally a town so vote because there's no money?
Here, we're just setting up the trust, and then
Right.
11 funds it. Yep. Yep. So move
Hold
the,
on. Oh.
Yep.
Article
yeah.
10.
So the motion is move the article as printed in the warrant. That's our
And the-
recommendation.
like 3-page bylaw in the warrant.
Yeah.
Well,
More.
Bradley,
4 pages.
second.
Bradley, Andrew, thank you very much. Any discussion?
My only discussion is that I know what Paul was talking about, that we don't have a strict dollar cap on what this, the trust can approve for spending. But I think if it becomes a problem, the powers that be can go back and amend the bylaw in the future. So I'm going to support it.
I mean, the control over the amount of money the trust can spend is that the trust can only spend money that's been given to it by the town meeting. So at the town meeting, we have to raise and appropriate or authorize a transfer of funds from these stabilization funds. So the town meeting always has control over how much money the trust is given.
Right. But it's,
Unless it's a donation, right?
Excuse me?
If it was a donation from say, a landholder.
The town meeting would have to vote to accept the donation
To the trust,
to the trust.
so if I were going to play this out, it just, where the checks and balances may not be robust, is it doesn't say that you have to come back to town meeting if you're spending more than $1 million, for instance. So it will put the authority in the hands of that trust to move ahead with housing developments and housing projects that could be substantial if there is a windfall to the trust.
Well, if the trust has been given the money by the town meeting, I mean, the trust, the job of the trust is to execute on projects. It's not the job of the trust to decide how much money the town spends on affordable housing. Town meeting decides how much money we spend on affordable housing. Executing on the detail of providing affordable housing in accordance with what the town meeting authorizes, I mean, the town meeting has control.
So is it essentially like a school building committee where the school building committee doesn't decide the amount, they just oversee the projects?
Right, they have the authority to spend the money in appropriate ways in accordance with the bylaws of the bylaws of the town and the trust document.
So
And the reason we put oversight information in there is that some of these towns have trusts where nobody has any oversight once the money is granted. What we've done is we've provided oversight for amounts that are very large, that are a large fraction of the money the trust has, and the oversight is exercised by the Board of Selectmen. The reason he chose the Board of Selectmen is because usually when you're making these real estate transactions, you can't wait 6 months to make up your mind as to what to do. You need to get action within, a couple of weeks. So the Board of Selectmen is really an appropriate oversight.
And we're being proactive because we know we have a plan to fill this trust with money from Pulte and whatnot.
Well, again, the money from Pulte will be transferred one lump sum, a little bit at a time based on the town meeting voting it.
Right. But I mean, but one of the reasons for all this proactive stuff is because we do have
If we do not put the trust in place, then we don't have any mechanisms for spending the Pulte money, and we don't have any mechanism for spending the money that's going to come about in remediation payments that are going to come from developers under the new zoning bylaws that we passed in the last town meeting.
So I'm gonna, just a caveat, I'm gonna support this. But it isn't like a school building committee. A building committee executes on a site at a building for a purpose that has been thoroughly approved by town meeting. This is much more of a blank check to this trust to say, move ahead on affordable housing projects, but it's not every affordable housing project that has to come back to town meeting. So
That's correct.
There are scenarios that very large affordable housing expenditures could be made without having to come back to town meeting.
Only if the town meeting gives them large amounts of money.
No, I don't agree with that. It is a trust, and Section 5A1 says that they can accept personal property, money, gift, grant, contributions.
Donations.
It doesn't say anything about oversight on that. The only oversight that's in this document is about spending less than 50, more than 50%. I don't think a donation needs to come through the town meeting.
So scenario, if somebody gives the trust a $50 million gift,
Nice.
they can spend $25 million or $100 million gift. They can spend 50 million of it without coming back to town meeting. So, whether that happens that way, I don't know.
No, they can spend up to 50% of their assets as they choose. Once it goes over 50% of their assets, then the Board of Selectmen are the oversight, right? Not the town meeting. The town meeting only appropriates,
Okay.
or only gives money to the trust. And I want to also point out that the town meeting, with respect to the Pulte money, said that money could go to the trust or for senior purposes. So it doesn't necessarily mean that all of that money is going into the Affordable Housing Trust, right? So at every time the town meeting votes, there may be competing demands on that money. And the town meeting has to make that decision.
So can I ask a question about the 50% cap? So can they do 50% of what they have each and every time? So essentially, 50% of what you have today, and then the next time we come around, another 50%. So they've now cut out 75% out of their whole total, and then another if they don't have anything come in.
But they can't spend up to 100% without oversight. That's
In
also
one cycle?
50% of their liquid assets. I mean,
right.
One expects the trust not to have a lot of liquid assets. I mean, if the trust sits there, if the town meeting keeps giving the money trust year after year, and the trust doesn't spend it, the town meeting ought to be stopped from. I mean, we ought to change the town meeting. I mean, you can't keep giving people money if they don't spend it. Once they spend it, it's gone. It's no longer subject to change as to how you spend it. So it's really liquid assets.
But does it say? So I didn't read this in full detail to understand that nuance.
So Beth, if they have $1 million, they have $1 million in liquid assets. They can spend up to $500,000 without approval.
On a specific project. On a specific project.
$5,000, and they can spend $250,000 without coming back. So you have to look at the balance of their liquid assets.
It's not liquid, by the way.
It's just assets. Because they can.
It's not liquid. So if it was land's not liquid. So, just so we know that.
Anyway, it's a lot of trust and faith we're putting into the trustees of this Westborough Affordable Housing Trust.
Jody, I just asked that we vote this one next week when we vote this, whatever we missed. I just feel like I want to reread this more carefully. Like I've learned a lot in the last week because I saw Alan Edinburgh's presentation at the school committee yesterday, but I was half tuned, like I didn't realize. And I know he's doing a lot of educating people, and I just feel like I need more time to process this.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
I think that's fine. I think let me review where we're at though. So I think we probably need to get back together then on Monday, because really we need to kind of have this wrapped up by next Thursday.
Yep. Okay. I think you're right. And now we have two articles that we are going to hear more about or talk more about.
Well, if we're not voting on 10, I think we really have to pass over 11.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, clearly, yeah, you got to wait, because if you decide not to vote for a trust, you can't fund the trust that doesn't exist.
Yep. So,
Should we bring Alan back on Monday?
And I think asking, is there a cap on what they can spend before coming back for more authorization? Is there a dollar cap?
Well, that's what Paul was missing.
Yep.
With dollar cap.
We asked him and he answered. I don't know.
He did.
At this point, it's up to the Board of Selectmen whether they would want to change it. And, I didn't see a lot of appetite for that, but.
I mean, the problem is that this document is written and all legalese, and the warrant is closed. So making amendments to it is tricky.
But you can amend it on a town meeting floor. I mean, the finance committee has two actions they can take. They can vote to not support this motion at all, and/or they can offer an amendment to the bylaw on the town meeting floor, which will be acted on individually as an individual motion.
Right. But it makes sense I think it makes sense to see if we can get, well, like I said, I want to read it better. But I think
if people can give me specific questions, I'll give you specific answers. I mean, I can go through that section again and interpret what it means in English as opposed to legalese.
Right. That's what I still feel like I need to do for myself.
I'll write you something tomorrow. I'll write something tomorrow morning and send it to Sean, and he can send it out to the committee.
So Hank, I mean, in a nutshell, in terms of the balance of checks and balances and power, I guess my biggest concern is, could a major affordable housing project go in with the approval of 5 trustees without any other input if the balance of...
Only if the town meeting gives them the money.
But the town meeting doesn't give them money for a specific purpose or a specific project. The town meeting...
That's correct. I mean, if the town meeting gives them $5 million, they can spend $2.5 million. I can't conceive of why the town meeting would give them $5 million.
Well, the thing is I can, because if you have a project in the future and you want to just put away money so that you can afford to do it later, I could see the town.
Well, if you give that's not the mechanism we would use to make funds available for future spending. We've never used that kind of a mechanism before. You set up stabilization funds and do things of that sort so that you have control over when the money gets spent and where it gets spent.
So are you saying you would recommend the town put money in the stabilization fund until a project was brought forward to be... Until a request was brought forward by the Housing Trust that the town meeting was willing to fund. Now, if the town meeting demands that the Housing Trust tell them specifically and exactly what they're going to do with the money, then they'll have to do that to get the money. But one of the reasons one sets up a housing trust is you don't want to invite the town meeting to play NIMBY on affordable housing projects.
That's exactly my question.
Well, but that goes...
if you want the town meeting to play NIMBY on affordable housing projects, then don't vote for a trust.
That doesn't make sense.
Those 5 people get to decide what affordable housing projects go in.
Well, again, within the guidelines that are set for the trust, I mean, affordable housing has very clear definitions and there's very clear terms and conditions under which you do the work and such. So, yeah, I mean, that's what happens. Those 5 people get to decide which affordable housing projects get done.
Within the boundaries of zoning and other things.
Yeah, I mean, you're still dealing with zoning. You're still dealing with, and you're talking hundreds of. Most trusts end up getting funded with $400,000 or $500,000. I mean, to fund a trust with $1 million is unusual. Most of these, the trust funding on an annual basis is usually in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range.
Walter makes a good point that there are other approvals in place. It doesn't just get put through
No, I mean, any development that gets done has to go through the permitting process, through the planning board process, the ZBA process, et cetera.
It is an unelected group, which has advantages and disadvantages. You know, the advantages, they're not subject to, you know, political posturing, I guess, but the disadvantages that they have less accountability.
But I mean, I'm assuming they're appointed by the Board of Selectmen?
The Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority.
Right.
Okay, so on 10 and 11, what do we want to do here? Do we want to hold off on them?
And holding off means having another meeting on Monday, right?
Yes. Oh, wait.
So, I mean, we had held next Thursday.
I would have needed to have gotten out an agenda today, right?
Okay.
You
know, I feel like I'm not
Thursday.
as concerned as I am about not understanding just how much power is invested in these 5 trustees, really not being super clear about it. I am persuaded that we need to do something about housing affordability as a very large issue. So I'm a little perplexed, and I don't know that I would recommend that we torpedo this whole effort. And yet
I'm not interested in torpedoing it either. I just felt like, you know, nuances and is my recommendation slightly different than what it, you know, directly slightly different because of Paul's mention of the cap of dollars. You know, it's a nuancy thing.
Yeah, there's another process. There's another process under our rules that we can follow. We can vote it tonight, and then re-vote it again on next Thursday when we have a book in front of us and we're doing a review of a final draft. And the worst thing that happens is we change the vote. We change the vote in the final draft, and that's not a big. I don't think that's a difficult thing to do.
Well, what difference does that make then if we vote next Thursday night?
You don't have to vote it tonight. You can wait till you look at the final draft of the book and vote it in the final draft of the book, whatever you prefer.
Jody, just to answer your question, this trust in many towns has an enormous amount of authority. And in fact, they're almost unchecked.
Yeah.
And the working group has put in these layers of oversight. This is why I was concerned a little bit about the selectmen and so forth. And I think we ought to get a little more information before we vote in any way on this. Not because I'm interested in shooting this down, but we're a little late in the game now as a committee to start having this conversation when the warrant is already closed. We had a presentation weeks ago that we should have been asking these questions at. And if we did and they didn't get a sufficient answer, we should have said something then. So I think we need to hold over until we get more information and then vote next Thursday.
You could draft the R&R and, you know, with the warrant in it and just not have the votes on these articles, and we could take the articles, you know, talk about them more before we vote on Thursday.
Yeah, we've also voted articles on town meeting floor, either just before the meeting or during the meeting. There's a precedent for doing that. We've done that where the R&R book says that the Finance Committee will provide a recommendation on town meeting floor. So that's another way one can go about dealing with this.
Yeah, but it's a lot harder during COVID.
Yeah, but I mean, also that.
Well, we're still going to be on town meeting floor. I mean,
I know, but it's a lot harder to do the vote during town meeting.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to vote at town meeting. You can just report the vote. If you wanted to print your book, you can still have a vote at a public meeting beforehand and then just report the vote.
Yeah. I mean, we usually typically do that because there is information that we're waiting for that wasn't available prior. And in this case, I think we should be able to figure it out by next Thursday and make a vote and, because there's not anything that's going to happen between next Thursday and
Right.
town meeting.
I apologize. I mean, this one is just one I feel like when Paul brought up the no cap, I felt like I hadn't read it thoroughly enough.
Okay, so let me ask this. So we can hold over 10 and 11 till next Thursday. We'll have a meeting next Thursday. And, but are there things we have to go get answers, or is this more people just going away and doing some more review and coming back with their own general feelings about it?
You know, I guess the questions I have is how much can those 5 trustees do? How much authority do they have to move forward on major projects without town meeting approving those major projects?
Well, they don't need town meeting at all. They need the Board of Selectmen if they go over 50%. Right?
Yeah, you know what? The more you say that, the more uncomfortable I get.
Jody, the housing trust concept and the intention and purpose of having a housing trust, that one can develop and put in place affordable housing
right now
that meets affordability guidelines and has a whole bunch of requirements by the Department of Housing and Community Development, et cetera. And to do that without having in a fairly flexible way, without having to go back to town meeting with a specific piece of land and a specific building and all kinds of specifics that will make it very difficult to do affordable housing development, because it just takes too long.
And I think the other piece is that this is a subcommittee essentially of the selectmen. So I can't complain about the selectmen being the final authority, because they were the final authority before they developed the housing trust.
This is not a subcommittee of the Selectmen.
No.
This is an independent trust that is set up by the town of Westborough via the Selectmen. And under normal circumstances, there would be no oversight of this trust. It's the way the trust was written at this point. The articles of the trust provided oversight. That's why I mentioned before that the town council asked, why are they putting in oversight?
Yeah, Michael's correct. I read a number of trust documents from a number of different towns. I've also worked with a number of trusts in different towns, and our trust document, the trust document proposed for Westborough, has more controls in it than the average town in the state of Massachusetts.
Okay, so I have a scenario question, or just I'm going to muse. We've been working really hard to not be subject to Chapter 40B, where a developer can come in, because we haven't kept our 10% threshold. A developer can come in and bypass all of our local approvals and put in an affordable housing complex. And we know we're building schools and whatnot because, you know, that happened at the one instance we had going below, 10% affordability threshold. Why are we now, so we've worked really hard to make our own decisions about affordable housing. Why are we now vesting in 5 people, trustees of a new trust, the authority, outsized authority to move affordable housing developments forward? And that's what the intention is.
Who do you expect to provide subsidized affordable housing in the community? I mean, the reason we are where we are at, which is we have a very insufficient supply of affordable housing, is because nobody's been doing that.
But
there's no mechanism for creating affordable housing in the community other than for private developers to do it as part of their development. And then when they do it under their terms and conditions with no town input.
Over 10% of our housing stock is affordable, which outperforms any of our neighbors who are comparable.
That's not correct. It does not outperform any of our neighbors. Many of our neighbors are at 10% or higher. And over time, as our housing stock increases, as we build more houses, that number is going to go down. And there is a projection that some years out, we will be below the 10%. Oh, by the way, even at the 10%, there's a substantial lack of affordable housing opportunities for folks to live in the town. And that's a lot of the data that Alan brought forward. It's on the web, by the way. There's on the Affordable Housing Working Group, there's a bunch of slides and information that says that, we've got a substantial deficiency of affordable housing in this community. Now, that's quite honestly, that's true of many other communities in Worcester County and in Middlesex County. It's even worse in Middlesex County. But again, that's the situation. So, I mean, it turns out affordable housing trusts are a very good mechanism for getting affordable housing built in communities. If we would like to have more affordable housing built in the community where we have some control, we want to put a trust in place. If we don't want to, if we don't want to put a trust in place, we'll have to find some other mechanism to deal with managing the funds that we have.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is you do need a small group of people who are going to dedicate their time to finding opportunities of a house coming up and they want to update it or I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities and you're not going to do that if you have to construe either a special town meeting or wait. I think that's impractical to do it. So,
yep.
And I think the scope is going to be somewhat limited by how much, if they're good at what they do and people are happy with it, town meeting will vote potentially to transfer more funds to the trust. And if they aren't, they probably won't.
Right. So do we want to hold here on 10 and 11 and we'll bring up the discussion again next Thursday on 10 and 11. Do we want to then move on to try and get through the last 3 articles, then maybe talk a little bit about the R&R and discuss anything else for next Thursday? Is there other things that folks wanted to cover? So I think you're right. I think it's worth everybody just sort of re-reviewing this. And then, if you get the opportunity, maybe looking at some other neighboring towns. I think, Hank, I think you work a little bit with the Northborough Housing Trust, don't you?
Yeah, I've worked with the Northborough Housing Trust. I've worked with the Holliston Housing Trust. I've worked with the Upton Housing Trust. I've worked with the Wayland Housing Trust.
So.
And those are all trusts just like this one, Hank?
They actually have less oversight. The Northborough Housing Trust is a private corporation and doesn't have the level of oversight that we're proposing.
Okay.
And out of curiosity, Hank, in the last, how long have you been involved with, say, specifically the Northborough one?
With Northborough Housing Trust, 6 or 8 years. I'm working with Habitat. We've done projects with the Northborough Housing Trust over a period of years.
Yeah, and how many properties would you say you've done in that time period?
Oh, 3 or 4. I mean, we recently, in the last 4 years, we with the Northborough Housing Trust, we did 4 units of affordable housing.
That's 4 years, 4 units. Because a lot of it is converting like a single or a 2-family from regular into affordable, or.
We've done some of that. We've done some, we've funded some new construction. We've done renovations in Northborough. I mean,
So Hank, what's the allocation per project? On average?
The allocation, I mean, typically a project is going to, a home in Westborough, to build a single family home in Westborough, you're talking about $400,000 to $500,000. Yeah. And typically that home will sell for something like $250,000, $300,000. So you're going to subsidize the unit to the tune of anywhere from $125,000 to $250,000.
Yeah, and that's this is all good work, and when we discuss it in the mic, I'm always completely supportive. But why isn't there $1 million cap on the transactions?
There's not $1 million cap on the transactions. We're talking about giving them $625,000, so the cap would be $300,000.
I'm talking about a bylaw that's there in perpetuity, and who knows what the changing circumstances are. Who knows who's going to be.
Again, I mean, if the town meeting gives them a couple of $1 million, then the cap goes up. But why would the town meeting give them a couple of $1 million?
And why would it have to be the town meeting? Why wouldn't the developer come in and give them many, many millions of dollars and have people sitting up who are willing to throw the project to that developer? And
There's not a mechanism by which the developer could do that. The developer would have to get approval from the planning board, from the board of selectmen, and from a variety of other folks to do that.
But
And there's no way that approval would be granted. Again, I mean,
the funding, Hank, if the funding is just donated through
the developer can't give them a bunch of money and not get something for it in return, Jody.
There are pass-throughs. There are pass-throughs, Hank. There are people
Excuse me?
there are pass-throughs. There are people out there who use pass-throughs to give millions and millions of dollars to a trust that could have the authority to put through a development that is.
I mean, you got to ask yourself, why would somebody want to give money to Westborough and they don't get anything for it in exchange? The trust cannot go build affordable housing and decide who's going to live in the affordable housing. There's a state mandated process by one which selects people to live in the housing. There are income limits on the people, and there's mechanisms by which, basically involving lotteries, by which you select folks to be in the housing.
Okay, let's table this until next week. Article 12.
I got to go get a power supply for my computer.
I just want to say, because I ignited some of this, that I am for this trust. I just questioned the unlimited part of it.
I do too.
Start over again. I don't want to leave the impression I'm against it.
I just want to make sure, because trusts are such complicated documents, and I'm not a lawyer, that we make sure that our input is the appropriate input.
Yep, and we're not going to figure that out tonight.
Thank you, Sean.
Article 12.
Okay.
So can I make a motion on Article 12?
Can I request that we do ask Alan Edinburgh to come when we talk about, just in case there's any questions? Because I think he would have been able to answer some of our questions tonight, and he might have helped us move forward.
Okay. All right, we'll put out that invite. Okay, Article 12.
All right, I move, this is Article 12, is the Eli Whitney Street utility easements. So I move that we vote to recommend the article as printed in the warrant. Article 12, Eli Whitney Street utility easement.
I second.
Okay, any questions on Article 12? Okay, all right. Hank, we just did the motion and second for Article 12, Eli Whitney street easements. We're now going to roll call vote unless you had any questions.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Board.
Yes.
Ms. Blumberg.
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush.
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keough, yes. 900 on Article 12. Article 13.
Okay, Article 13 is to amend the general bylaws. This is regarding the Community Development Department. This is from the Board of Selectmen. So I move that we recommend to approve the article as written in the warrant.
Thank you. We have a second? Second, Walter. Thank you very much. Okay, any questions on this one? All right. Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Hensley?
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford?
Board, yes.
Ms. Blumberg?
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush?
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Yes.
Mr. Beretti?
Yes.
Mr. Leslie?
Leslie, yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Bradley, yes.
Keough, yes. 900 on Article 13. Article 14.
Article 14 is the Community Development Director salary. I move to recommend to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,500 for the purpose of the article as stated in the warrant.
Second.
Second, Beth, thank you. Any discussion?
I just want to confirm, this is a supplement to a salary that already exists, correct?
Correct.
For a
He's
year?
getting bumped up.
Yeah, so it's a supplement to a salary. Okay.
Okay.
Next year's when they come back to replace that position. I bet. Being the cynic.
Yeah, but the purpose is when you increase the job responsibilities, you have to go through your ranking and rating process, and what they're saying is that they've increased the job responsibilities, and it's moving the job to a higher salary level. That's all.
Right.
Yep.
No, I'm fine with that. The way it's worded, it just implies that they're actually getting a person for $5,000. And I was like, nope, that's not happening.
Not going to happen, right? Yeah.
No. Okay. A roll call vote. Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Ford,
Ford, yes.
Ms. Blumberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Roush,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Hugel,
Yes.
Mr. Beretti,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes, 900. Okay, so that is all the articles outside of 6I, 10, and 11, which we will hold over for next Thursday. So for 6I, I think, Mike, you were going to the police chief to just get a little more information there. And then 10 and 11, we're going to go do some research and then complete the discussion we had tonight, and then hopefully vote on those articles next Thursday. So then the other outstanding item is both the fall and the annual town meeting. So there is a discussion up front. I guess we actually write up our report and recommendations. We didn't do that. It wasn't necessary for the special town meeting with those three, with just those three articles. So I think Mike and I will take a stab at it and then shoot it out to everybody. And I was planning on just sort of going off of the template from the last fall town meeting, I think, sort of fill in the numbers, discuss the articles, probably, leave a little spacing for what's outstanding and determinations we may make on those in the future, and get that out. And then we can have those votes next Thursday, discuss the report and recommendation and make any changes to it that we see fit, in terms of, how things are worded and sort of the tone that's being presented in the R&R. And if people have questions or want to, folks generally want to consider changing that, certainly we can do that next Thursday. If we can come to sort of an agreement on those, and I'll make the changes and resend it out. At that point, we're just going to print, I think. Is there anything that I am overlooking?
I'm not sure, but I think the last one that we did, Jody did, and we were at that point, before COVID, we're very concerned about the general feel of the budget. And I think you may need to tone this to be reassuring that we're actually, given everything that's going on, we're like, the financial committee is tightly watching the budget. The town is working hard to not overspend, but is doing those actions which we deem necessary.
Right.
Or some wording to the effect of, we're trying to watch the budget still.
Yeah. And I think one of my points would be that we're currently above our free cash targets. And even after the spending, we will be, but we're be closely monitoring this going forward.
Because there's so much unknown, and stay healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I guess at that point, we will hopefully have election results at that point.
Yes.
But you know, there still will be uncertainty through the end of the year. So
right. I mean, especially where the state is reluctant to, is taking its time to get the numbers to us.
Yeah. Yes. They're having trouble finalizing this year's budget.
Overall, since when you guys would have talked about it in the spring, though, they were talking about a 4.5% tax increase, which ended up under 3%.
Right.
High 2s anyway, which to me is a more positive.
Right. So I mean,
it's really to Beth's point. We're in a better place than we thought we would be in. Ironically, last spring.
Right, and I think that the one thing you have to be careful about if you use the previous one as a model is our tone in that one was very, hey, let's be careful, and now I think we need to say, hey, we were, and with a positive spin.
Yes. Yeah. No, but Walter, you make a good point. We made all those cuts to try and keep the increase at 4.5%. And now we've done well enough that the increase is actually going to be under 3%. Right, that's an excellent point. So that'll be kind of the gist. But
sort of the bad news. I mean, the good news is it's under 3.5% or whatever it is. But the bad news is yes, we have an increase because that's inevitable.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah.
If you want to maintain services that we've come to expect.
Yep.
Probably want to make some commentary about our thinking about whether the free cash position that we're sustaining is appropriate or too high or too low. My personal opinion is that we've done a good job and we're keeping free cash at a level that's really at the very high end or even beyond the high end of our policy. But we're doing that because we have serious concerns about needing a reserve fund to deal with issues that are going to crop up in next year's budget.
Yes.
Because I'm concerned that there will probably be some citizens at town meeting who would like to see us use more free cash to reduce the tax impact this year.
Gotcha.
Right.
Thank you, Andy.
So good luck writing it. Thank you for being here.
So we'll see how it goes. All right. We go back to the agenda. I think that's sort of the agenda for our next meeting. The 3 final votes, trying to come to agreement on the R&R and get ready for a fall town meeting.
So that's Thursday the 29th?
Thursday the 29th, yes.
It's going to be at 7 or at 5?
I'm willing to vote on that. What did people think of 5?
I like 5.
Not good for me. But.
Not good?
I prefer 7.
7?
Okay.
7.
I'd compromise at 6.
Six would be better for me, than 5.
Right. All right. Well, that didn't help. I got a little bit of everything there.
Well, we have a long history of meeting at 7, and it's true that people aren't necessarily commuting, but sometimes like life and plans built around that.
Yeah. We'll tell you what, since hopefully this is our last meeting before fall town meeting, we'll make it back at 7, and then we can see if we want to discuss this more and come up with a new time starting in December. Excellent. Any liaison reports?
I'll just say the school committee has actively started working on the school department has actively started working on the budget. They did their presentation with enrollment numbers to the school committee last night. I didn't record anything, so I can't tell you, but the school department is shaky on the numbers. And I've used the word shaky only because they're trying to assess how many people withdrew for homeschooling or just for this year with COVID that will come back next year versus moved out and they don't know about it. So, and they're also trying to assess, I believe that there's some families where they may be worried they sort of fell off the grid. And, you know, between the hybrid and the not hybrid, between the hybrid and the remote options or homeschooling. And then they didn't make a statement about the governor has said that all schools should allow people to switch between the model that they chose and the alternative, like hybrid to remote or remote to hybrid. And they explained to the school committee that, you know, if one or two people do it, okay, no big deal. But if you start to get 20 kids per class doing it, you have to relocate teachers and move other kids and unintended consequences. So they're sort of gearing up with their breath held to see how many people request switching models. And they also said that, you know, they're not, because the general flow and feeling is that schools should be open for the kids' benefit and kids should be going to school as opposed to remote, but that, you know, if there is an uptick in COVID, they're still going to shut, like everybody will get shut down. So it gets, they're sort of anticipating not knowing yet how many people are going to request to switch the model they picked. And it's as much work as at the beginning of the year, getting everybody into their classes. So that's my sort of interpretation of watching the numbers.
That makes sense. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
Any other liaison reports?
I can do one unofficially from the Board of Health. So Halloween is definitely an issue that people are watching, and they're going to meet with the Board of Selectmen for a more specific discussion on Halloween, because people in the center of town are super concerned about the numbers of people, especially from out of town as well as in town, who come to the center of town and trick or treat. Whereas people who live in the more far spread apart houses, it's not as big a deal. You know, Halloween is low hanging. You can leave the candy outside on a flat tray. You know, you don't have to open your door. Kids can stay in their family group. So there's like a lot of discussion about Halloween activity and what's going to be allowed in Westborough still.
I think I saw that's slated for noon tomorrow. They have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, because I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Beth. All right. In terms of public reminders, early voting is opened down at Town Hall. The folks who are interested, any other public reminders?
I'd like to move that we adjourn the meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Mike.
Sorry, folks, but I'm hungry.
All right, here we go. Ms. Hensley.
Hensley, yes.
Ms. Board.
Yeah.
I think we lost Ms. Blumberg. Ms. Blumberg, okay. Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Hugel.
Yes.
Mr. Beretti.
Yes.
Mr. Leslie.
Yes.
Mr. Bradley.
Bradley, yes.
Keo, yes. Everyone, thank you very much.
Thank
See
you,
you
Sean.
next Thursday at 7 o'clock.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks.
You and
Bye.
Sean,